Thank you for tuning in, dear listeners. This is Papa Redwood. Tonight's story might make you reconsider that hunting license that you've been aching for. Hell, it'll make you reconsider camping. Tonight's story comes from a very special anthology, and if you hang around to the end, you can find out where to find it, as well as others of its kin. But tonight's story, dear listeners, is entitled, Not Quite a Deer, by Jonathon Mast.
3 nights without water. Silent lightning forked across the distant sky, so far away we couldn't hear the rumbling. The humid heat of the day refused to let up, even an hour after sunset. The herd was restless, refusing to bed down for the evening. The cattle lowed at the heavens, shifting on their hooves. Most of the boys were circling the herd, trying to keep them contained. It wouldn't take much for them to stampede. Micah shoveled steaming beans into his trap. Ben had set up the campfire like normal, of course, and the boys were eating in shifts. It would probably be another sleepless night, but the segundo was sure they'd make Hope River by tomorrow. Once the herd was watered, everything should be easier.
"They're real loud tonight,"
Micah said between bites. Ben looked out toward the herd, sweat dripping down his face. I haven't seen beefs this restless in a long time.
"Oh,"
Micah kept shoveling. The faster he ate, the faster the next boy could eat. They tried to help each other out as much as they could, especially at times like this. Ben shook his head. Hope it doesn't come to that.
"The herd stampeded before. We've always got them back under control in a few miles."
Micah shrugged. Ben sniffed. Hope so, Micah. Hope so. The herd screamed. Every single one called out to the sky, all at once. Micah leaped to his feet, plate in hand. He couldn't hear anything over the beefs. Silence. And the fire crackled. Micah couldn't move. He hadn't heard silence on the trail like this ever. It didn't happen. There was always some fool steer making a racket. There were all the bugs chattering in the weeds, coyotes, something. No, nothing. Ben swore. Micah, you stay here. You don't want to be riding out there.
"Like hell."
He set down the plate and dashed for his night horse, still saddled from one he rode in 15 minutes ago for his supper. The steady chestnut shied from his hand. "Come on, boy," he chided the horse. It stepped back, its eyes white. It snorted. Micah lunged to seize the reins in his calloused hand and swung himself onto the saddle. "Come on." And they were off into the night, toward the herd. After just a minute, he met up with Freeman. "What's going on?" Micah asked. Freeman shook his head.
"No idea. They just up and stopped. Look at them. They're all ready to run, all right."
Lightning lit the sky in a silent flash. "I'll circle the other way. You keep them calm," Micah said. Freeman spat.
"Boy, I've been on more trails than you and your brothers combined. I know my business."
Micah rode away without another word. Sure, it was his first trail, but he was no fool. He knew how to calm a herd. He knew how to rein in a stampede, too. But he didn't want to have to. He should pass one of the other riders soon enough. There were 14 of them, and they should all be circling the herd. His horse's hooves thudded against the dirt and grass. The beef, though. Not a single beef laid down. Not one. Even after 3 days without water, they should be tired enough that at least some would be tuckered out. They weren't moving either. They weren't shifting from hoof to hoof. They weren't flicking their ears. They stood still. Micah's breath came short and fast. Sure, it was his first trail, but his family always had a few head of cattle. He knew what was normal. He'd never experienced anything like it, and he'd never heard anything like it in the yarns around the campfire. His heart thudded hard in his chest. Movement. There, On the hill facing the herd, silent lightning lit up the prairie, a shadow of movement before the darkness returned. Micah's hand shot to his pistol. Anything could make the herd run when it was this tense. The back of his throat itched. They'd have to cut back on their water, too. His canteen had a few swallows of water in it yet. What was out there? Hard to tell in the darkness from this distance. Probably not a rustler. Didn't look human. Didn't look big enough to be a buffalo either, thank God. Another flash of light. Just a deer. Micah breathed a sigh. Some of the tension fled from his shoulders, but the itch in the back of his throat grew in intensity. His hand slipped away from his pistol. A deer. He would probably scamper off, silent and quick. Shouldn't bother the herd at all. Shouldn't. But something about the deer stuck in his head. The flash of light was so brief, outlining slender legs, body, antlerless head. Another flash. It had moved closer to the herd. The thing was fast. It stood still in the brief brightness, its head turned toward Micah. Did it only have 2 legs? No, it must have been a trick of the light. Micah's hand wandered toward his pistol again. Tension returned to stretch across his shoulders. His horse shied. No, we're circling the herd. Ain't no deer gonna scare us, he said. He hoped he convinced the horse. The chestnut hesitated, then obeyed. Maybe one of the other boys would be coming his way soon. Should be, at least. If they were all moving, he should be meeting one of the others pretty quick, right? Usually, they sang to the herd to keep the beef calm. No one was singing tonight, he realized. Where were the bugs? Why weren't the cattle moving at all? Another flash. The deer stood not 30 feet away. Just a deer. No. It wasn't quite a deer. It had too many joints. No, not enough. Something about its legs. How many legs did it have? It stared into Micah. Darkness. The beef stampeded. The thunder of hooves swelled. The ground trembled. A bevy of pistol shots fired into the air, a signal from the other boys so everyone could tell what direction the herd was running. The herd ran from the deer. From the thing that was like a deer. From the whatever it was that was staring straight at Micah. Even though the darkness had swallowed the thing up, Micah was sure it was still there. His horse shook under him, and not from exhaustion. Or maybe that was just Micah shaking. Hard to tell. The herd thundered away. The boys would be chasing them, trying to take the lead, to rope off the leaders and control the run. Here was Micah, terrified of a deer. Just a deer. That's all it was. That's all it could be. He'd heard stories, of course. They all told their stories around the fire at night. It's what they did on the trail. He'd heard about the dead, the ghosts, the bloody tales. He'd heard about the not-quite men who stole boys from the trail so their women would mourn them. He knew about all that. And no one told him about a deer. He should turn the horse. He should chase after the herd, help keep it together, get it back under control. He should. He couldn't move his arms. He couldn't kick his heels. The humid air pressed in on him, squeezing his chest. His heart fought back. Breathing was getting hard. He coughed. Something scratched the back of his throat. Some of the beans must have launched there. Lightning lit the prairie with its cold and sudden light. The deer, so not quite a deer, it stood right in front of him. His horse bucked, it kicked and screamed. Micah fell wild from his saddle. He snatched at the reins as he fell. His lip on his fingers, his left foot tangled in the stirrup. Didn't matter. He was out of the saddle and his horse ran. He hung off the side of the horse, the ground pounding away out of control. The horse still screaming, left foot in a stirrup. Micah clawed at his horse's flank. The ground struck his head. Breathe. Breathe. Micah inhaled sharp and fast. That's when the pain hit. He lay face down on the ground. The dirt was cool against his face. Something rumbled. His horse. It was galloping away. Was he sleeping? No, he had fallen. His thoughts came to him, gathered them up like a deck of cards that had fallen on the ground. His head hurt, and his left ankle burned. Something crunched inside his mouth. None of that was good. Hopefully the boys would be able to find him after they regathered the herd. He could fire his pistol, of course, if he heard one of them close by. Should be fine. Roll over. Staring at the dirt isn't going to help you, Micah. He cried out as he flung himself over onto his back. He lay on the slight incline, his head toward the top of the rise. Above him stars shone bright until a border of darkness cut off their shine. The clouds. They were getting close. And the lightning was close enough now he heard its grumbling over the distant herd. Cold light flooded the grassland. A dark shadow drank in the light about 100 yards away. Though not quite a deer, it shrouded his direction. He tried scrambling to his feet, but his head swam and his ankle gave out. He sprawled on the ground in darkness. His pistol, he snatched at his belt. His pistol was there. He drew it. He tried drawing it. Something was wrong with his hand, with his arm. He was weak. Couldn't lift the weight of his pistol. Another flash of light. It stood in front of him. It was no deer. Micah didn't know what it was. It was something else. Something older. He tried to scream, but something in his mouth wouldn't let him. When the boys found Micah's horse the next dawn, they knew something was wrong. Ben told them that Micah was gone, not worth searching for, but there was a loyalty among the boys. Most of them stayed with the herd and drove them toward Hope River, but a few turned back to find Micah. They found him just an hour later. At least, they thought it was him. He looked like he'd been baked by the sun, untouched by predators for weeks. His clothes were tatters, his skin tight and brown against a withered frame. A small tree sprouted out from between his jaws. On the ground nearby, they found deer tracks, but nothing else. Thank you for tuning in, dear listeners. When you're out tonight, be careful what you see on the trail. No matter which road you take, each one is going to have something strange lying across one of its miles. I'd like to thank Jonathon Mast for letting me read the story tonight, and Dark Owl Publishing for providing the fine anthology where this one comes from. Tonight's story came from a horror collection entitled Something Wicked This Way Rides. You can find it up on their website, linked below, or you could find it on Amazon. And if you're lucky, you might even find it in one of your local stores. I hope to see you all next week. Take care and enjoy some R&R.